All right, welcome everybody. This is the Unchained Capital Continuing Education webinar. We have these live every single month, first Friday of the month, and our goal is to help you be sovereign in your Bitcoin wealth by helping you to feel confident and secure in your Bitcoin custody solution. My name is Justine Harper. I'm the VP of Concierge here at Unchained Capital, and today I'm joined by my colleagues Tyler Campbell, Technical Director of Concierge, and David Layton, Director of Concierge. Today we are covering a really important topic and one that we get a lot of questions about, and that is operational security best practices. What does that mean though? Well, it means that you've started using 2-of-3 multisig with Unchained Capital, using the most, in my opinion, secure way to store your Bitcoin. But what are some best practices for your account, for storing your keys, and so forth? So that's what the goal for today is, to help you learn how to eliminate single points of failure. We're going to be going over our key terms, which are some common topics and things that we're going to be talking about today. And then we're going to go into best practices for your Unchained account, covering 2FA, what is it, what value does it add, and how to set it up, video verification within your Unchained account. We're going to go over a password manager and the benefit that they add, as well as storing your wallet configuration file and best practices for naming your keys. Then we're going to jump into key storage security principles, essentially meaning, hey, what pieces of information do you have and what are some best ways to secure them? Now, remember, this is a very subjective thing. Everybody's security model is going to be different. So today's goal is to give you some best practices and examples so that you can start building your own security model. And then, of course, we're going to wrap it up with a live Q&A section for all those questions that you guys are going to drop into the chat, as well as the QA box. You can find those on the bottom of your Zoom window. Remember, this will be recorded and will be on our YouTube channel. If you haven't checked that out, make sure you do, because all of the past ones are going to be there as well. But this live version is just for clients exclusively, so welcome. So to get started, I'm going to turn it over to David, who's going to go through our key terms. David?
All right, thank you, Justine. And as usual, we're going to start with some key terms. So some that Justine already just mentioned, like the wallet configuration file, and some that you may have heard already through talking to us or just being around the Bitcoin space. We always start with Bitcoin address. So Bitcoin does not live on a device, or it does not live on an exchange. Bitcoin lives in Bitcoin addresses. These are two examples of addresses here. One is a single sig, one is a multi-signature address. Of course, with Unchained, you build multi-signature addresses. That's where the Bitcoin lives. And the balance of all the addresses are tracked on the Bitcoin blockchain. So it's an open public database. All of the addresses and all of the Bitcoin within it can be seen by anyone, anywhere, and verified on your own. These addresses are built by one or multiple public keys. And again, it's all the entire 21 million supply can be seen in different places and addresses on the blockchain. So addresses are built with public keys. That's the next term here, is public keys. You can think of it, a good analogy is like a lock to a given address. Public keys build addresses, and addresses, that is what is used to deposit Bitcoin. So hardware wallets like Trezor, Coldcard, and Ledger share public keys with wallet software to build addresses. And to continue the analogy, if you look at the public key as the lock, the private key can be looked at as the key. So the private key can be used to is used to spend or withdraw Bitcoin from an address, and each private key generates public keys, which generate the addresses. So the private key is almost the most important information that you can protect. We'll go on to another term that's a little more important, I would say, the master key version. But the private key, if public keys are used to receive, private keys are used to spend. All right. Backing up a little bit, looking at the XPub, or the extended public key, you may have heard that term. It's been a very popularized term in the Bitcoin space for people knowing what it is or not knowing what it is. But to continue the analogy, it can be looked at as the master lock. So an extended public key can be shared with wallet software to build a series of addresses. And this would be what we refer to as a wallet. A seed can derive nearly infinite XPubs, or extended public keys. So we have a document that I would encourage people to check out that's been very popular, the Ticket to Understanding XPubs. It goes in depth, and this is something that we would encourage people to jump onto our platform or our blog and take a look at this post. Go on to seed phrases. So the last part of the analogy with the keys and locks, the seed phrase can be looked at as the master key. Seed phrases are the most important piece of information that you can protect and secure. And that is because it can be used to restore your private keys to any device that adheres to the same protocol. And the seed phrases are going to be either 12 or 24, the most popular. There's also 18 words that the order of these words are incredibly important. They can be used to, again, restore your private keys. So you always want to store and secure a copy of your seed phrase physically. And there's an example at the bottom of the page there of what a seed phrase looks like. That's not actually securing any Bitcoin, but that's a good example of a 24-word seed phrase. And the last term here that we're going to cover is the wallet configuration file. When you build a address, specifically a multi-sig address, with Unchained Capital, you can download a wallet configuration file. This can be looked at as the direction to your address or addresses. And the wallet configuration file has all of the XPub or extended public key information, the derivation paths, the address type, which in our case, it's pay to script hash, and the quorum, which with Unchained multi-sig is 2 of 3. All of that information can be used to rebuild your multi-signature wallet externally outside of Unchained using different software like Caravan is the one that we created, or some other wallet software like Spectre and Sparrow and Electrum. So wallet configuration file, very important piece of information, important file for you to save and download and know how to access if you ever needed to restore or rebuild your wallet outside of Unchained Capital. All right, and now I'm going to pass it back over to talk about best practices for your Unchained account to continue the agenda here. And
awesome, thank you, David. Yeah, I can definitely dive into it. Something we definitely want to hit on here. Kind of going in order, we're going to talk about 2FA and video verification. And then after that, we'll jump into password manager, how something like a password manager might be used to store that wallet configuration file that David just touched on. Then we'll kind of wrap up with naming your keys and best practices around that. And I'll pass it back off to Justine for key storage and security tips. So starting with 2FA for your account. So 2FA, two-factor authentication, it's fairly popular, has been over the past, maybe decade and a half, but a really common way for, software companies to use 2FA is to send a string of digits to your cell phone, right? They just text you a number and then you enter that number in online and that gets you access to whatever your platform you're trying to access. So with Unchained Capital, you do have your username or email, and then you have your password. We do allow for you to add a 2FA option or a two-factor authentication option, but we do not use SMS-based two-factor authentication. So when you're using SMS-based two-factor authentication, ultimately you're relying on the security of the cell networks. And those cell networks have been exposed over the years, and they're really just not safe. They're rife for man-in-the-middle attacks where somebody might, have your cell phone number, they get access to a SIM card, they kind of spoof themselves as being you, and then all of a sudden they get your security code sent to their phone and they can then access your account. That is really not what we want to strive for. So coming out of the evolution of SMS-based two-factor authentication, there are these authenticator apps. So we have Google Authenticator is a very popular option, along with Authy, the kind of going from left to right with the logos down on bottom. And then we have Yubikey or the Yubiko app, which is kind of a combination of a little hardware stick that does make use of encryption. So cryptography and encryption, not just unique to Bitcoin, of course, has been around for a while. And these 2FA, two-factor authentication hardware devices certainly make use of that cryptography as well. So in the platform, we do use those authenticator apps. I'm going to be demoing here in just a minute about where to access these from your account settings and then how to set it up, of course, as well. But before I do that, I do want to mention kind of what we're protecting here with 2FA in your account. So over on, your desired exchange, whatever the exchange du jour is for you, the 2FA protecting your account is protecting your account information. So you have your username, you have your password, you have your two-factor authentication, right? As industry best practice, I hope that you're not using SMS-based two-factor authentication. So at a minimum, I would suggest looking into downloading one of these authenticator apps for your given exchange. But that being said, let's say all of that information is compromised. Well, all of a sudden there's access to your account. And if you look back at previous webinars we've done, you could withdraw Bitcoin from your exchange. Anybody with those credentials can do that. So when we think about Unchained and we think about multi-sig and what we have, the power we have in holding our own keys, 2FA access, let's say worst case scenario, somebody does get 2FA access and your username and password. Well, what you're giving up in terms of risk is privacy information. Somebody would be able to see how much Bitcoin you have. They'd be able to log in and poke around in your account, maybe make unnecessary or unwanted changes from a stylistic standpoint. But at the end of the day, your Bitcoin's still protected by your two keys. So that kind of just again highlights the power of holding your own keys, knowing that the security of your Bitcoin is not at risk if you're following the key storage and security principles that Justine's going to be going over later. So we really just want to highlight that not only do we not use SMS-based two-factor authentication, but even with 2FA, the security of your Bitcoin is not at risk. So, and I am going to be diving into the platform to show 2FA, but I'm also going to be showing video verification and how we make use of video verification at Unchained. So before I kind of dive into the platform and share my screen, I just want to cover what video verification is and how it's used from the Unchained context. So we have a video verification tool. It is opt-in, so you do have to opt into it, into the settings on your account. I'm going to be showing you that in just a little bit. But what you can do is, if you notice on the right-hand side on this image here, we allow for our users to kind of read a script as like a baseline video verification video. So you have that initial script that you read, and then if there's going to be an action you want to do in the future on your account, like set a threshold limit for your vault. So you could set a 5% threshold where, hey, anytime you want to author a transaction and you want to use our key to do it, and it's over 5% of your vault, we're going to say, hey, we need an additional video verification from you. We would use that video, compare it against this original, and go forward with our video verification process. Another instance of using video verification would be resetting your two-factor authentication that we covered in the previous slide, as well as doing a key replacement. So if you need to do a key replacement, one of your keys was compromised, maybe key replacement's a potential topic for a future webinar as well. We do make use of the video verification component there. So again, it is opt-in, just that added layer of security. We do want to make sure that ultimately it is you that is requesting certain platform activities. So if video verification is something you're interested in, I do suggest kind of following along with me, or at least making note, maybe referencing the YouTube video later, just so you know where to go in the platform to access video verification. So with that being said, I'm going to swipe over now to one of my test accounts here. And you see here, I have my username and I have my password all entered in, but I can just click sign in. I don't have 2FA set up at the moment. Nothing is kind of barricading my account from just using a username and password. But if I move the zoom with showing our lovely faces, what you'd be able to do within your Unchained account to access both 2FA to enable it and the video verification is you can click the drop-down menu for your where your initial should be in the upper right-hand corner of your account, and you can go down to the settings option in the menu. Once you're on settings, there's going to be 3 tabs across the top header bar of the screen. You can select the middle tab for security. And within security, you can of course change your password, pretty standard. But if we scroll down just a bit, you're going to see 2 more options. So we have the 2FA, two-factor authentication, where you can enable it. We also have the option for you to record your identity verification video here. So with 2FA, what you'd be able to do, and just to kind of demo a quick instance of actually using this, since I don't have it set up for this staging account, if you select enable 2FA, what you'd be able to do is get this pop-up modal with a QR code that you could then scan with your two-factor authentication provider, whichever app you're using. In this case, I'm going to be using Google Authenticator. I could open up my Google Authenticator app, and I'm going to scan this QR code. Once I scan the QR code, it's now added to my list of 2FA codes that are generated. So I can just look at that 2FA code and input the code that I see on my phone to enable 2FA. Once you enable 2FA, it is going to sign you out just to prove that the two-factor authentication is working. So it signs me out, and now I have my same username and password that you saw before, but if I go to log in, now it's going to request that two-factor authentication code from me. So that, is just a high-level run through of how to access both of those security features from within the Unchained account. And with that, I'm going to, I know it's kind of like a lot right away, so I'm going to pause for questions here. David, do you see any good questions come through kind of before I dive into our next range of topics?
Yes, I see some great questions coming through. A lot of great questions here. I'm going to hold some of them till a little later on in the webinar because they're about inheritance and some verifications, but there is a 2FA question from Alan. Are 2FA authenticators interchangeable? That is, say I start with Google Auth on one phone, realize I want to use a Yubikey, can I switch it out? So I'll take this one. Yes, you can absolutely authenticate and then disable 2FA on your own, and you can replace it with a Yubikey. So say you go through the process of setting up 2FA using Google Authenticator or Authy, you decide you want a physical device like a Yubikey, a little extra security. You can certainly go on, disable it by inputting your code. So same way that you would have set it up. And then you can go through the process of setting up an additional 2FA. If for any reason you lose access to your device or you need to replace your 2FA without having the device or access to Google Authenticator or however you set it up, it's a little bit more of a process, but we can help you to do what's called a reset. It takes a lot of verification of your identity, but we can go through that process with you as well. Is there anything else that you guys would add to that?
Just make sure before you change it, you still have access to the old one. Because like David mentioned, if you've lost access to that, you have to kind of go through some manual things with Unchained. You have to verify who you are. So as long as you still have that old authentication method that you use, you can do this all on your own.
Absolutely. That was a really good question, David.
That was a great question, Alan.
Yeah, Alan, through David. Thank you, Alan. Really appreciate that one. Awesome. So with that, I'm going to continue on. I know we're going to have an awesome subset of questions to answer towards the end of the webinar. So I'm going to kind of cover off on the next set of best practices now for your account outside of the 2FA and the video verification, which again are both really important. I do suggest playing around in your account, going to that security settings tab, and thinking hard about certainly enabling 2FA and then whether you want to make use of video verification. So the next items that we want to touch on here are password managers. So, I mean, the benefits of a password manager probably cannot be overstated, especially now, right? I mean, everything from your Netflix account to your Unchained account, we have so many passwords we need to manage on a day-to-day basis. We fall into these common pitfalls of either using the same password for everything or making one small tweak or iteration to a password. And you might think that you don't, but I know we're all human. We all do this just because it's easy. So a really good password hygiene and kind of internet security hygiene thing to focus on is starting with a password manager. You can, kind of aggregate all your passwords inside of one password manager, where then you just have one master password to remember. And that is going to be the password for your password manager. So instead of, keeping a notes app on your phone or a sticky note next to your desk where all of this stuff is located, that's just really sloppy at the end of the day and increases your attack surface, having a dedicated password manager from a really trusted provider is a great step towards improving your security hygiene. So we have a few options noted here. We have 1Password, Bitwarden is a fully open source password manager. We also have LastPass noted here. So password managers, really, really nice way to store your account information at Unchained. Kind of bleeding into that a little bit is the wallet configuration file that David was mentioning at the end of key terms. So that wallet configuration file. So it's available for every vault you create. So that is a really important point. Every time you create a vault, could be an IRA vault, then you have a personal vault, you maybe have multiple personal vaults. For every vault you create, you're going to want to download your wallet configuration file. Now, as we've mentioned, this is okay to keep digital, right? It's the same kind of concept as somebody were to obtain this file from a privacy standpoint. They might be able to recreate your vault in another wallet coordinator software, and they'd see how much Bitcoin you have. But in order for them to move it, they do need your 2 keys still. So from a security perspective, that's why we say it's okay to be kept digital. But with it being digital, you don't want it just out on your desktop, right? So kind of password managers, what I just was talking about before, is a really nice place to keep this wallet configuration file. Different password managers allow for different types of files to be uploaded. So for example, I believe LastPass, maybe you can add a secure note, but you may have to copy and paste some of the information, or I guess all of the information that is in this wallet configuration file. So there's a little bit of nuances depending on the service you go with. But another benefit of a password manager is if you can sign into a cloud-based password manager that is secure, you can then access your wallet configuration file from really anywhere that has internet access. And that's kind of cool, right? If you have your wallet configuration file and it's downloaded on an SD card, and that physical SD card is back in your office, well, you're just subject to those limitations. So I do want to highlight that. The really also stressing the point that it's needed for each vault you create. It's not just enough to download one wallet configuration file, but you might maybe have 5 vaults. You do want to make sure to stay on top of that as well for each additional vault. A common question I do get a lot as well is, let's say you do create a vault, you download the wallet configuration file. Are those XPubs and is that information static? Yes, it does not change. The only thing that will change is if you create a new vault, you're just going to want to make sure to download that wallet configuration file as well. So the last step here is going to be key names, or I guess the last item to pinpoint with key names. So in the platform, and I'm going to be kind of swiping over and showing both where you can access your wallet configuration file and where you can change the name of your keys. But just to highlight on key names. So when we're setting up these devices and you have 2 hardware devices to work with, could be any number of combinations between Trezor, Ledger, and Coldcard in the platform. We want to be naming our keys something just from an organizational standpoint, so you know which key you're working with at any given time. So we have some general don'ts and general do's. For don'ts, we don't want to be naming your keys where you're storing them. Just from an OPSEC perspective, that is just operational security perspective. That's probably not a best practice. If you're keeping one key at your office and one key at your home, naming them office key and home key probably not recommended. If somebody does gain access to your account, gives them all the more reason to search those locations. The next set of don'ts would be naming your keys A and B or 1 and 2. Or after the specific brand. Kind of the reason why is if somebody does, maybe they plug in your Trezor and you've named your Trezor on the Trezor suite, key 1 or key 2. Somebody plugs it in and sees that, again, it gives them all the more reason to say, oh, okay, this is key 2. Maybe there's a key 1 somewhere that I can look for. So, again, just covering all your bases, trying to be as secure as possible. That's why we do recommend, naming your key something unique and memorable to you. Could be your favorite city or your favorite sports team. Our colleague Phil Geiger does the last names of his favorite Austrian economists, which I think is pretty funny. So you can have fun with it too. Just information that doesn't, give up anything about either your keys or your multi-sig situation. So with that being said, I'm going to swipe over to the platform, log into another one of my test accounts and show you where you can access that wallet configuration file, and then also where you're going to be able to edit the names of your keys. So let me swipe over here, and I have a different test account. Of course, have many that I test from, and being a good security conscious user, I do have 2FA set up. So just a second while I enter the 2FA code here. Awesome. So this should be taking me to my main vault, or my vault that I've titled main vault. So I have this main vault created. Now that I have the vault created, what I want to make sure to do is download that wallet configuration file. So in order to do that, where you can go is the transact tile here in the middle of the screen where it says deposit, withdraw, and transfer. You can select the 3 vertical dots at the upper right-hand corner of this screen, and then select external spend info. To view this information, you can certainly select show information. And if you are copying and pasting into something like a LastPass, each field here does have the little clipboard by it. So you can just click on it and it'll copy it right to your clipboard, and you can then send it or paste it over into your password manager. We also give you this handy download button that is going to download a JSON file to your computer, and that is going to be your wallet configuration file. That's where you can then take the appropriate security measures to store that safely and securely. So I could just download it there. It's just going to go by default. Also a common question, it does go by default to your downloads directory. So that's where you're going to be able to find it. If you're on a PC or Mac, just go to your file explorer or file finder, and it should be, if you sort by time, the most recent thing that appears in your downloads directory. All right. And the last thing that I want to mention here is where you can change the name of your keys. Maybe you're out there going, oh man, I did name my key, underneath my kitchen sink as the whole name of the key, and maybe you don't want to give that away. So what you can go ahead and do is from the platform, you could select keys over on the left-hand side, or you could just select one of your keys that comprises your vault. But let's say I do that. Let's just say I see these keys here. Let's say I click volcano. What I'm going to be taken to then is the kind of landing page for my key. And on this landing page, you can of course see when you last did a key check, what vaults your key is a part of. Then most importantly, for the topic at hand, this little pencil icon next to the name of your key, and you can select rename key. And then you can enter the new name of your key and rename it. It is as simple as that. So that option always is available to you when you're adding a new key. Nothing is set in stone when you're entering the name. You can always go back and change it. Perfect. So with that, I'm going to go back to our presentation here. And before passing it back and continuing on with these awesome topics, just want to check in with David again. Any good questions come through there?
We have, yes, several dozen great questions, actually. I'm trying to keep these organized, and we will get to all of them at the end. I think that a common theme here that we're being asked about is on video verification and two-factor authenticator. So I think we'll just grab one or two of these right now. One question that was really good from Anon was, do you support two people to participate in the video verification, e.g. husband and wife? This was also a question from Steve. How would a husband/wife share a 2FA to have access to Unchained 2FA apps and codes specific to one phone? So the question is two parts. We got it from actually three different people. Do we support two people to participate in the video verification process for a single account? And then how would you share 2FA access to a single account? We can talk potentially about a business account with multiple members or admins, but on the single account, would one of you guys want to touch on that if we support multiple people?
I can jump in for the multiple people, and maybe Tyler can then touch on the 2FA aspect of it. So with Unchained Capital currently, an individual account is seen as an individual account. Whoever's name that account is in is seen as the owner. So having a video verification is going to be set up with the owner of that account, because if another individual comes to us, we don't see them as the owner, even if they are a spouse. Now, when we get into inheritance and how that would work with passing on your wealth, that's a little bit different, right? Because now we're dealing with sort of legal aspects of what is an owner of an asset, and we do work with that. But within your account, there's one owner and therefore one video verification. I know people ask a lot of questions about the inheritance aspect, so I'll just slightly touch on that very quickly, because there will be a future webinar on this, and I assume we'll kind of touch on it later as well. But if an individual who's now the owner of your assets from a legal standpoint reaches out to Unchained, we will assist them. What that looks like depends on a lot of different things and where you live, but they will need at least one key. So keep that in mind. They need one seed phrase. They need some sort of key, that whether that's a device or a seed phrase, they need at least one. So that would be how that would work. But as far as video verification, one account, one owner, therefore one video verification.
Yeah, and Justine, unless you have a different answer for the 2FA, I would certainly love to go back and maybe get a 100% confident answer from our security team, just because in my mind, it is a one-to-one mapping to that account owner. I know technically you could share 2FA codes within the certain allotted time frame that it gives you for each code, but that does create a tricky situation when you're talking about account access to another individual. So unless you had any other added color there, Justine, what I would definitely feel more confident is doing is talking to our security team and maybe reaching out to that individual after the webinar.
Yeah, I think that is a great answer. And it's kind of like a two-part thing here, right? Like, so Unchained can assist you with certain things who we see as the owner. Anyone who has access to your account can access your account. So there is a capability to set up 2FA using the app at the same time, working with it together to share that. But that from our standpoint, it's sort of unrelated to your account in our regard. That would be something you would set up on your own, if that makes sense. That's sort of my unanswered answer. The correct one would be, yeah, there is some security risk to it. So I would think about that, but it is something you can set up on your own if you choose to. That was a great question. Really good questions here, guys. You guys are phenomenal.
We're getting
questions. I'm blown
yeah,
away.
a lot of solid questions here. And just like operational security in general, it's going to be a little bit different, tailored to each person, depending on what we'll get into later is secure locations and your personal preferences for security. So everything that we're giving today is high level, pointing you in the right direction. And some of the specifics might need to be worked out depending on your circumstance. So that was great. Thanks, guys. Like I said before, we still have a couple dozen that we'll get to. So if you've asked a question, we're going to try and get it towards the end. But for right now, we are going to go ahead and hand it over to Justine to go over key storage security principles. Justine?
Thank you. Thank you very much. And yeah, you guys, I'm scrolling through these questions and I'm going to try to work through this pretty quickly because I feel like we should have a lot of time for these questions specifically. So yes, good job on that. But now that we've talked about sort of ways to eliminate single points of failure within your Unchained Capital account, we really wanted to take the time to answer the biggest question that we get, which is, okay, now that I have these keys, right? Now that I have these pieces of information to secure my Bitcoin, where do I store them? How does this work? Now, like we mentioned before, this is very subjective and you should keep that in mind. These are going to be best practices. So what we want to start with here is telling you some best practice storage security principles. And then you're going to go and build your own security model, keeping these things in mind. So let's talk a little bit about like, what are we storing here, right? So you've set up your Unchained account. One of us has most likely helped you onboard. We've set up devices. You're going to have 2 devices here. I have a Trezor Model T and a cold card in front of me. With each of those devices, we have a backup, aka seed phrase. So you're storing 4 pieces of information, which we're going to get into a little bit later as well. So the best practices for storing these security elements or best principles here is going to be that you're going to hold the physical seed phrases or backups for each hardware device. You don't want to rely on the device specifically. You always want to have a backup. Many times these devices can fail. They are extremely secure, but they're not perfect. Sometimes when you do a firmware update, hey, it wipes the memory. That's totally not a problem if you have the backups, right? You just import those back into the device. So keeping physical copies of these seed phrases is a very vital aspect of your security method. Another one is going to be avoid co-locating any hardware wallets or seed phrases while in storage, meaning you want to try to spread these out. You want to eliminate single points of failure. You don't want them all jammed into your office drawer, right? Not from just a outside looking in perspective. An individual could find them and then have 2 keys. But also, what if something happens to your home? What if there's a flood? What if there's a storm? What if there's a fire? You want to eliminate single points of failure by spreading these out. What this looks like to you can depend on a lot of different factors. And that's why we say everybody's security model is going to be a little bit different. Another one is going to be to use, using a safety deposit box is totally fine. A lot of individuals do that for either the seed phrases or the device, but you want to avoid putting everything in the same bank for the same reason we mentioned, single point of failure. We're going to avoid all single points of failure, so try to spread those out as well. Now, keep in mind that in multi-sig, there are no single points of failure here, right? That's the point, that's the goal. So using a trusted third party to hold one piece of information is okay. Now, in a single signature, when this one key accesses your Bitcoin, you don't want to give that to anyone, right? Because then they can have access to your Bitcoin. In multi-sig, this isn't a single point of failure. Neither of these are. So if you have a trusted friend or family member that perhaps has a safe in their home or business where they have some sort of place to store this securely, or maybe a third-party entity that you're already working with, lawyer, trust, an individual who's creating a trust for you, those sorts of things. That could be an asset for many people to store one piece of information. So keep that in mind with multi-sig. It does eliminate that as a whole. So let's go on and move towards some examples. Now that we've kind of talked about that, well, what does that look like? So again, these are examples, right? You're going to have 2 hardware wallets and 2 seed phrases to protect. And this is in our 2 of 3 multi-sig where client holds 2 keys, right? So some example locations of that may look like your primary home's safe. Why in a safe though? Can I just put it in a drawer? Sure, but a safe is going to be a little bit safer from the aspect of fire, flood, those sorts of things. That's just a little layer of protection. Another example location may be a secondary home or an office safe. So you're just thinking of a different location. Now, sometimes people don't have that. So I've heard of some individuals putting something in their home and maybe they have an outbuilding somewhere that is a separate location that they could use, even if it's in the same, lot of land. Another example location would be a safety deposit box, like we spoke of, or a trusted family member or friend. On the bottom, you can kind of just see an example of where maybe someone would put a hardware wallet at their home safe, maybe put their second hardware wallet at their office in a safe, and then have a recovery seed phrase in a deposit box at one bank, and then have a trusted family member or friend hold the second one. So those are some general examples just to kind of get you thinking so that you can build your own security model. So now we've got seed phrases, we've got devices to secure. These seed phrases, as you can tell, are written on paper, right? Paper is not the most secure way to store things long term, right? So let's talk about some ways that maybe we could help this be a little bit more secure as well to protect from fire, water damage, and then normal wear and tear. So one way would be to laminate your backups, right? You are going to always have these handwritten. You're never going to print them out right on a computer because we always want to keep these physical and not digital. So laminating them, while it's not an ultimate protection, actually gives a little bit of help, right? It can stop minimal water damage and normal wear and tear. Another really great way to do this is using metal plates, where you can actually stamp your seed phrases into the metal plate. And this opens up a whole realm of different places you can then store it, right? So you don't have to worry about some of the same aspects as you do with a piece of paper. Really, really important when you're going to use metal plates, though, to never, ever, ever, ever send those phrases to anyone to have them engrave them for you. That's a big no. We never want to expose these to anyone, right? So you do want to do an in-home engraving. I've heard people just get the little engraving kit and do it, or they have some really great models that are stamping kits that they send you the plate, they send you the stamps, you hammer it into the plate itself. So that's a really great way to add some additional security with your seed phrases specifically. Another is to choose a fireproof safe. So when you go looking for a place to store this, maybe look at the exposure time of each safe because it does vary, but that just adds another layer of protection as well. So those are some general ways of to try to add additional layers of protection over and above eliminating the single points of failure. I hope that helps. Again, this is a very subjective thing. So what I hope you do after this webinar is go home and start thinking of ideas. It's important to not overcomplicate this as well, because what I found is some individuals try to make it so complicated that then they just end up throwing it into their drawer at home anyways, because it's just way too complicated when they need to go check their keys or access them. That's what you want to avoid. You want to find a really good balance of ease of use as well as security. So don't make it overly complicated. It's also okay to start somewhat simple and then build out from there as you get more comfortable and get more ideas of where to store your seed phrases and hardware devices. So with that kind of finishes up the overall security principles of storing your information. And we're going to jump right into the Q&A section because you guys have so many questions. And so we've got about 20 minutes left, so that should give us quite a bit of time to dig into these. So with that, David, I'll hand it over to you, and I hope you've got some great questions picked out for us.
Awesome. Yes, we do have quite a few great questions, a lot of them on the same theme. So everyone's kind of sticking to the theme of what we wanted to talk about here, OPSEC. So I appreciate that. I wanted to start by highlighting not a question, but a comment from Jeff Walker here. True love is being trusted with someone's seed phrase. That's beautiful, Jeff. So thanks for sharing that in. That just makes everyone's Friday. So here is a question, question/comment from Rob, suggesting also you should mention pins for hardware wallets should not be stored with the hardware wallet. In password manager is better. So that's a suggestion, we can kind of talk about where you could store a pin or what the pin can access. So the pin can unlock the device, right? The device is what's used to sign the transaction to move Bitcoin. But with multi-sig, specifically with the setup collaborative custody multi-sig, if you unlock a device and provide a signature, you still need the second device or a signature from a second key. So that is a good recommendation not to have the PIN written on a device so that you can get right into it. But we do encourage clients to have a PIN written down somewhere with the seed phrase. So that would be fine if you have a PIN with a seed phrase so that you don't forget it. But you, at a high level, do not ever want to have the two seed phrases or the two devices, any two items that can move Bitcoin stored together. So that's where this geographical distributed multi-sig comes into play. So good tip there, don't have the PIN with the device itself, but don't have the two devices or two pieces of information that can sign transactions to move Bitcoin ever co-located.
That's the beauty of multi-sig, right? Especially with Unchained Capital, like you mentioned, is that there are no single points of failure. Another option too is you don't even have to have them with the seed phrases. It's something we recommend just so an individual has somewhere to look for them in case they forget. Because some devices can be reloaded with the seed, but like on the cold card, you forget that PIN number, that device is bricked. Doesn't mean you've lost your key as long as you have those backups, but it does mean you need to have a new device now. So you could even set the PIN somewhere in your home, maybe away from the device, just in a separate location. So there's a theme here. Separate locations for things, right? And that eliminates anything as a single point of failure, but great suggestion for sure.
Awesome. All right, next question or set of questions. I'm going to try and group these together because there's a lot of like questions, but we had both Brent and Philip ask a question about recovery in the event of somebody passing away or something happening to someone. So what is a recommended best practice in the unfortunate event that I pass away? How would my survivors gain access to the BTC? Is a seed phrase enough? Anything else required? So at a very high level, and we can maybe all touch on this, the seed phrases and access to an account would be a way to move Bitcoin. As a part of what we are thinking about for this year, and we can touch on with bringing new team members on with retirement and inheritance planning, we are coming out with a more formal document to allow people to think about inheritance a little bit differently, or just some more pointed advice. But at a high level, one seed phrase plus documentation and perhaps a lawyer, certificate of death, that type of information coming to Unchained, we will help somebody walk through that process. So inheritance is something that we think about a lot. Obviously, our clients think about it a lot, and this is something we're building more formal recommendations around. But to answer the question exactly, one seed phrase is not enough to move Bitcoin. One seed phrase plus some other information and the help of Unchained is enough to move your Bitcoin.
I add in there that this does depend a lot on where you're located. There are some legal aspects outside of Bitcoin that go into this. If your significant other has access to your Bitcoin keys and knows how to use Bitcoin, they can just do whatever they'd like, right? Because Bitcoin is whoever owns the keys owns the Bitcoin. Now, in this situation, the question is, if they only have one key, is that enough? And as long as you have a relationship with Unchained Capital with collaborative custody, we also hold that backup key. There would be some legal aspects that are involved as well. So just would be good to kind of contact a attorney or someone who's helping you sort of create these wills and living documents, and therefore discuss that with them. But wanted to add in, next week we are doing an IRA overview with our IRA and Inheritance series. That's going to be a new series, though, that actually is going to focus on this quite a bit. So in the next few months, you should see a webinar coming out specifically about inheritance as well. And we hope to answer more of those questions. And like David said, build a plan for you as well to give advice. Just wanted to add that in. Chilling the next webinar, just to, I got to do that, you know.
I do want to add one thing here too on this topic. Certainly, you know, your estate planning procedures and legal questions aside, I think this is also a really good time to remember back to what Justine was saying about, let's say a tragic event does happen, not having these steps to then access a particular element of your setup be so complex that it just becomes an additional complex treasure hunt where there already are a lot of emotions flowing during that time in your life, right? So thinking about that as well, kind of protecting yourself from yourself in the future is just a good thing to keep in mind.
Thanks, Tyler. Yeah, you're spot on. Okay, so we had quite a few great questions from an anonymous attendee. So whoever you are, thank you for asking a series of great questions here. The next one I want to jump into is from Anon. If you have multiple profiles, business, personal, IRA, etc., on Unchained and want to do video identity or video verification, which account should I do that on? And then suggesting my 2FA is on one specific account. So Justine, do you want to take that one?
Yep. So when you create your account, you're going to have one login. That's going to be your account. And then within that, you can have sub accounts, right? You can create your IRA and a business account. You could do different trusts. You can have a lot of different options there. Your 2FA will be attached to your main account. When you log in, that's where you will set it up. So you will go through your personal account at that point. In my opinion, the video verification can be done at any account level. Because it still has the same owner. So where you do it at is probably less important. It depends on which account you're going to be using. If you want to do a video verification each, great. But from our standing, I believe that it would just be one owner, one account, one video verification, and that would span across your other ones. The only way that this would be different is if you have a business account where other people are involved. That might be a little bit different, and you can reach out to us directly because that will be sort of a case-by-case basis.
All right, perfect. Thank you, Justine. Okay, let's see here. I have a question that has Tyler's name written all over it from Diane. Hi all, if a threshold is set and UC is unavailable, how are funds accessed to using Caravan?
Oh, great. I love this question. This is perfect. So if Unchained is unavailable and there's a threshold set, but how do you access your Bitcoin? I think the answer to the question is hidden in the question is that you would use Caravan with the 2 keys that you have access to if Unchained is unavailable. If Unchained is unavailable, in that doomsday scenario that we talk about, that means that, in order to move your Bitcoin using an external recovery software or wallet coordinator software like Caravan or Sparrow or Electrum, you would need your 2 keys. Now, the threshold element is Unchained platform specific. So if you go to recover your vault using your wallet configuration file over in Caravan, you're not going to get, a red warning text that says there's a threshold there. We just have that in the platform for, my.unchained.com, where you go and access your vault and your balance and can withdraw and deposit from the Unchained side of things. That's if, our key is going to be used. Really what we want to protect against is like, hey, if I have a vault with Unchained and, all of a sudden 100% of my vault is going to be, I'm withdrawing it, but I need Unchained's key to do it. Well, that's an instance where, hey, it's a nice safeguard to have the video verification threshold set there, just as that extra kind of verification layer, but it is non-applicable to other wallet coordinator softwares. So hopefully that answers your question. You would still need both of your keys, but the threshold is platform specific.
Perfect. Thank you, Tyler.
Of course.
Yeah, and Caravan is such a powerful tool. That's something that we all enjoy using for those reasons. Okay, so excuse me, I have one here that I will answer. What risk is there if someone finds my wallet config file? So this is something that we kind of touched on live, but I saw the wallet configuration file. What happens if somebody gets their eyes on it? What happens if I lose it or if it's not secure? We had 2 different people ask a similar question. So the wallet configuration file can be used, as Tyler said, as Justine touched on earlier, to rebuild your multi-signature wallet in Caravan or externally in software that can read that information and use software that would be an interface with the blockchain, an interface with your addresses. That would allow anybody who has your wallet configuration file to see the balances, transaction history, UTXOs of that wallet or of your addresses, but they cannot spend Bitcoin, withdraw Bitcoin without having applied 2 signatures from 2 of those 3 keys used to build the vault. Obviously, Unchained would not be providing a signature externally, so they would need both of your keys or both the devices housing those keys or both of your seed phrases in order to move your Bitcoin. So a long way of saying the danger is knowing your Bitcoin balances. It's not actually a security issue. Nobody can actually move your Bitcoin with the config file. All right. So move on to the next one here that I think this one has Tyler written on it too, and then I'll pass Justine one after this. But this is a question about using passphrases. So can you talk to using a passphrase, a 13th or 25th word, in addition to the 12 or 24 word seed phrase? I've heard Phil say no, but a lot of hardcore Bitcoiners say it's a must. So maybe you could talk on why single signature that might be beneficial, and multi-sig why it could potentially be a point of failure.
For sure, absolutely. And a passphrase, also worth noting that different hardware devices that you're working with, I think in the Trezor suite, it's originally, you see it as a hidden wallet when you plug in your device. And we do recommend, generally in multi-sig, when you're setting up 2 of 3 multi-sig with us, we recommend, maybe leaving passphrases for, just kind of as an additional option, maybe you want to learn more about in the future, but really, not using them in a 2 of 3 multi-sig setup. What a passphrase does is fundamentally change your seed. So you could have a 12 or 24 word seed phrase, and then you add a specific passphrase to it. You can think about it as a 13th or 25th word, if some of you have mentioned in the Q&A as a part of the question. And that does fundamentally, change your seed. So when Justine was covering those 4 elements that you need to keep safe earlier, your 2 devices and your 2 sets of seed words, well, if you have that additional 13th or 25th word, that additional passphrase is also then something that you need to protect, keep track of, keep safe. And it could act as a single point of failure for that entire seed. It's not just enough anymore to know your 12 or 24 word seed. You need to know that plus your passphrase. So it's really just, trying to help our users help themselves and think really hard about when they might want to use it, or the dangers of using it unless you're a very advanced user, know, the appropriate ways to go forward with the passphrase. So and if you're using single signature, which is just one hardware device or one seed phrase, adding a passphrase might help you with, a little bit of multiple components, multiple aspects needed in order to recover your Bitcoin. So if somebody finds your seed phrase, you wouldn't be out of luck. But at that point, I really just encourage you looking into 2 of 3 multi-sig. That way there's no additional, complexity that you're adding with a hidden wallet or that passphrase. You still have that redundancy and elimination of a single point of failure. So hopefully that provided a little bit of context. I'm definitely backing up Phil on that point. It is just really for advanced users, but I'm big on continuing education. I think we all are. So if you do want to continue your education, do some research on it, and truly understand what it is. I think at the end of the day, you're going to do a and B comparison, and the 2 of 3 multi-sig is going to outshine.
Awesome. Thank you, Tyler.
Of course.
All right. We are getting through quite a few of these, so bear with us here. We're going to try and get to every single one of them. We're running up against time. But Justine, let's get you a question. From Philip, can you import your seed phrase into another hardware wallet to stress test this backup process? Does this then invalidate the original hardware wallet and move everything to this new wallet? So does this move the key to the new wallet, and will it get wiped from the old wallet?
A great question. I love talking about hardware devices and seed phrases and how they work together, because I think this is one of the biggest misconceptions with newcomers. I know it was for me. And so when you really start to grasp and understand them, it sort of makes the whole concept a lot easier. So technically, you can load this seed phrase into as many devices as you want. The devices know nothing except what you told them. So if I take this seed phrase and I load it into a Trezor, and maybe I have a Trezor Model 1 and I load it into that to check that backup, it affects nothing that I already did. Now, one thing you want to keep in mind is now you're adding additional pieces of information you need to secure. But if this is from a testing standpoint, absolutely, go through the process, recover that seed. You should be testing your backups, not only on separate devices, but you should do that on your standard device as well, the main device that you're using. So it does not wipe the original device you're using. It does not affect it whatsoever, and the seed phrase can go into as many devices as you want. So yes, totally fine to do. Just keep that in mind, as if you're loading devices with your seed phrases, that device is now a key. So unless you wipe that, which you can totally do in the settings menu, that is now a piece of information you need to secure.
Awesome. Thank you, Justine. Here is another great question from Mel. I'll answer this very quickly. Please remind me if this is recorded to view later. Yes, that's important to touch on. These are all recorded and posted to our YouTube channel. So the live version of these Q&A webinars, continuing education webinars, I should say, are client exclusive. So everybody on this call asking these questions are clients. In a few days, we're going to post this publicly. So feel free to go back and review. It's a good time to touch on also, if you guys have questions that were not answered, go ahead and you can reach out to us one-off. You can look at other webinars. We've covered most of these questions, but we'll keep going here and try to crank out a few more. But great question on availability. All right.
I have a good question that I'm seeing, if it's all right if I jump in.
Yeah,
here.
please go for it. Grab it.
So I see a question from Jeff, maybe too far off topic, but is it okay to play with new vaults in my account? As I learn, I've created a new vault and added 2 keys from 1 cold card just to learn how all this works. No sats were harmed. Is this uncool from your perspective? Jeff, I play with vaults all day long as like a part of my job, and I absolutely love it. I think it's the best way to learn is to get, hands-on and actually dive in. So I, at least from my perspective, I would encourage you, to go through different actions, deposit, as long as, like you said, no sats were harmed, depositing to your vault, withdrawing from your vault, more advanced topics like changing the derivation paths and creating a new key. Things like that are only going to better you in the long run and pay dividends. So I absolutely encourage, playing around with multi-sig. And actually, if you are, feeling like an advanced user, playing around sounds like you are with a cold card, I do recommend checking out Caravan. And using Caravan to not only recover your vault, but to rebuild it over there, prepare for, that a doomsday scenario, just so you have access to your Bitcoin. From my perspective, that's totally okay. Justine, David, I would curious to hear your thoughts there too.
Oh, fully agree. I was going to show our Caravan webinar. We have a great Caravan webinar over on our YouTube channel that we went over some advanced settings of Caravan. So when you get there, go ahead and watch that too, because it can walk you through those different steps. But I agree. I mean, we kind of joke about the endless amounts of vaults that we have, because that's how you learn, right? And that's how you show other people as walking through that. So I actually think, yeah, that's great. It's way better than sending something off to a less secure method of storing your Bitcoin to test. Why not have it all within your 2 of 3 multi-sig, very secure? You can create multiple different vaults and then move things around within that to play around and test. I think, yeah, totally agree.
With great power comes great responsibility. So, as long as no sats were harmed, maybe playing around with 100,000 sats or so, $50 US worth of Bitcoin just to get a feel, absolutely encourage it.
Just remember, wallet configuration file. Every new vault has a new area, right? It's in a new address. It has a different location. So you need that different map for it. So just make sure if you create a new vault, even if it's just a test, go ahead and download that wallet configuration file and store it.
Perfect. And that actually answers David's question about, is there a wallet config file for each wallet? Yes, anytime you generate a new multi-sig wallet, you want to back that up with a config file. So we have probably 30 questions that would not get answered. This is a record. I wish that we would have booked this for 90 minutes or even 2 hours to keep going through. But we're going to pause there. I'm going to let Justine sign off. And if you have a specific question, reach out to me, David at Unchained, Justine, Tyler, same emails, first names at unchained.com if you guys wanted to have a one-off question. But I'll turn it over to Justine to wrap this up.
This was great. This was, and yeah, we do definitely take this feedback. The more questions we're getting at the end, because in my opinion, like this is the most valuable aspect, we may go ahead and change these webinars to include more time for questions. So never stop at those questions. Like David said, feel free to send those directly. If you want to get them answered, also our YouTube channel and our blog has a lot of really great information. So make sure you're using those educational resources, because our goal at Unchained is to help you feel sovereign in your Bitcoin wealth. And the way that we want to do that is with continuing education, not just these webinars, but our blog is full of great tutorials and information. So make sure you're checking that out. Otherwise, it was so great today. Thank you everybody for joining us. This is our monthly continuing education webinar that is exclusive live to clients. It is the first Friday of every month. So make sure you mark your calendars, same time, 11 a.m. Central Time, first Friday of the month. The next one will be on February 4th, and we hope to see you guys there. I just want to thank Tyler and David for being here, and just thank everyone for joining, and we will see you next time.
Thank you, everybody.